Welcome to the Jewellers Academy podcast. My name is Jessica Rose, a serial jewellery business owner, and I founded the multi-award-winning London Jewellery School and Jewellers Academy. Having helped over 1 million people learn jewellery making, I passionately believe that anyone can have a successful business making and selling things they love. Each week you'll hear tips, support and practical advice on how to launch and grow your jewellery or handmade business, as well as inspiring interviews. If, like me, you believe that handmade is best, then you're in the right place. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. Now let's jump into this week's episode. So welcome everyone to today's episode. I'm really excited to have the lovely Jess Van Dan here today. She's a self-employed silversmith working under the Epheriell label, which is her label. And she's been making jewellery since 2008 when she opened her Etsy shop to sell her jewellery as a hobby, and turned Epheriell into a full-time occupation in 2010, bringing her husband Nick on board soon after. And she specialises in eco sterling silver wedding rings, which are amazing, and works out of her solar-powered home, which is even more amazing, in the countryside north of Brisbane in Australia, which is also amazing. All amazing things. And she is also the founder of Create and Thrive and the Thriver Circle, where she teaches fellow makers how to turn their handmade hobby into a thriving business. So all great stuff. Welcome, Jess. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jess. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's Jess and Jess. Two jewellery Jesses.
J squared.
And we did an interview a few years ago, didn't we? Which was amazing. And it's wonderful to see both of our businesses growing and, you know, different things happening. So I'm excited to share more with everyone today. And today we're going to be talking around the topic of how to kickstart your Etsy store. So if you've been thinking about starting an Etsy store or you're still at the kind of early stages, this is going to be really helpful for you. Jess got started on Etsy as well. So Jess, do you want to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got into making jewellery? You said it started as a hobby.
Total hobby. I have no form. Okay, my training consists of a weekend silversmithing course. That is the only formal training I've ever done. Yeah, I started making jewellery. I kind of got into craft hobbies in my mid-20s. And, I'd go to Spotlight, which is like a big box craft store here in Australia, and sort of look around at all the different things, tried a few different things and got into jewellery making, and then sort of, started playing with some metal and really liked working with silver and did that short course. And then, I just over time sort of gravitated more and more to making silver jewellery. And for me, it was like I had a full-time job. I worked in education. That was fine. I never, ever in a million years intended to make jewellery like my living. But I started making stuff. I had piles and piles of stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe I should just try selling some of this just to, recoup some of my costs. And that's how it all started.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate as well. You know, we start making and then we're like, wait a minute, this is a lot of silver and I've spent a lot on this and maybe I need to make some of that back before, even just to reinvest in more silver so I can make more things. Yeah. So was Etsy, because this was a little while ago, was Etsy just like a no-brainer at that point, or were you thinking about websites or?
I'll be 40 this year. So when I was in high school is kind of when the internet really took off, at the mid 90s. And I was obsessed with it. Like I taught myself HTML. I learned how to build websites, like just for fun. And so I've kind of always in the back of my mind, I had this dream that one day I could somehow make an online business, that would work. And I I dabbled with a few things over the years, but this came out of left field. That wasn't what I was planning on doing. But so when I did decide to start selling stuff, for me, the no-brainer aspect was selling online because I had a, Monday to Friday job. I like my sleep-ins. I didn't want to get up, at 4 a.m. on a Saturday or a Sunday to go sell at markets. That didn't appeal to me really. So I'm like, well, I'll just, let's sell online. And I kind of somehow stumbled across Etsy. Like it wasn't massive back then. I think it only started in 2005, 2006. So this was 2008. And I stumbled across it somehow and thought, oh, this sounds like a good choice because it's, you know, it's deliberately set up to sell handmade stuff, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And, you know, eBay didn't seem like a great choice. And I mean, I could have built my own website, but e-commerce was a lot more difficult back then, you know. So I just went with Etsy. It seemed like you know, when I discovered it, I'm like, oh, this seems like a good choice to go with. I mean, there were other ones around. There was like Artfire and a few other websites around at that time, but Etsy was definitely seemed to be the pack leader, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it still kind of is. So so I did that, and you know, I knew nothing about business really. The job I was working in the time was actually a managerial job. I was managing a tuition center, so a maths and English tuition center, but that was the first job I'd ever had that had anything to do with business at all. So I kind of learned a bit about sales and stuff in that job, but I really didn't have much idea about it all. So it was a big learning curve for me. And I just was like, I'll just, you know, throw some stuff in the shop. How hard can it be?
Good, but I think that's a good attitude, you know, to get started with, because the opposite effect is, oh my God, this is going to be so hard. I need to learn everything before I start. And yeah, I think it's good to just throw yourself in the deep end and you figure out how to swim. I mean, you did. And yeah. So was it like immediately successful? Were you getting sales straight away, or tell us a bit about that kind of aspect of it?
So it took me about a month to get my first sale. And I can clearly remember the moment I saw that email and I was so ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, someone bought something. Like, it was like a $10 pair of earrings or something ridiculous. But I was so excited, and that was it just stoked my fire to keep going, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, when I started, my photography was horrible. My prices were abysmal. My products were pretty generic. Like, it was
all the good stuff.
The first stuff I was selling was literally just beads I bought at the craft store and chucked on some wire, you know, nothing special. But I kept going, and I kept playing with ideas and, you know, different types of craft, and learning and learning and learning and learning. So, you know, I'd say by the time the end of 2019 rolled around. So I opened in October 2008, and then at the end of 2009, life circumstances. So we just gotten married, and my boss had offered me the business to me. Like, it was a franchise. He's like, are you interested in buying the business? And I kind of sat down with my shiny new husband and we talked about it. And I was like, I've been doing this job for a couple of years. I like it, but I don't love it enough that I want to buy into it. And he's English, actually. He's from Southampton. And so he didn't have a working visa at that time. And we kind of went, well, if I just resign now, because my boss was going to try to sell it, you know, and I didn't want to just have a job where I was there until he sold it out from under me, if you know what I mean. So I'm like, I'm going to finish up the school year, because the school year finishes in December here. Finish up the school year, and then let's take some time to go traveling before we kind of settle down again and find jobs. And I actually shut the shop for a period of time at that point, because we actually retrofitted a van, like into a camper van, over the summer, and we were going to go traveling around Australia in the camper van. And we moved in to my parents' barn to use all my dad's tools to build this camper van and stuff.
Sounds very cool.
And so at that point, like the hobby business had been going pretty well. Like, I'd learned a lot at that stage. I'd been blogging a lot back when blogs were the big thing, you know, about what I was learning and my jewellery making and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, I'll just put it on hold and whatever. But then I had some medical issues that meant we kept being delayed on leaving. And so I'm like, well, I don't have a job. Nick doesn't have a job. We're stuck. Let's just reopen the shop.
That hobby business is looking good.
Yeah. Just try to sell off some of the stock I've got and whatnot. And then because the delay took like 8 months, by the time it was all sorted out, the business by that point had really started picking up. And we were kind of like, maybe we should just run with this and keep doing it. And
it was a sign.
So that's what happened. And we just kept growing it at that stage and went from there, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear how you just kind of went with the flow as well a little bit. Like, I think we can be so fixed in our ideas about this is how it's going to happen, and this is how my business will grow, and this is what my life will look like. And it's really nice. I mean, I'm sure at the time there may have been more challenges, But it's nice to just remember that we can, it all works out in the end if you keep going, whatever. And, I took quite a long break from my business as well and then came back to it. And I sort of thought, is it even going to exist after that? And you can always pick up and you can always kind of go again. So it's always nice to kind of hear about. So then, okay, let's talk a bit about Etsy for people getting started, because I know that one of the topics that you kind of mentioned when we were chatting before is this idea of having like a financially viable product. So tell us a bit about that and what you would recommend for people.
Well, I feel like a lot of makers were very much like me and kind of just making stuff and then let's just put it on Etsy, whatever, and don't really have any idea about the financial side of things, like how to price stuff and what's the market price expected to be for that particular product. How do I calculate what my product price should be? And a lot of, I think, especially in the non-professional craft community, people underprice themselves drastically. Usually that's how we start out, by seriously underpricing. Because we're like, I'll just charge what I paid for the materials and, whatever, which is terrible. It's terrible for everybody because it undervalues the whole industry, but it's your time and your expertise is worth something, and that's what we need to get into the price as well. So one thing I often tell my my students is like, okay, well, how much do you want to make from this business? Okay, in a year. All right, that you've got a number in your head. At your current prices, how many of your best-selling or medium product, like the one in the middle, how many would you have to sell in order to make that amount of money? Is that actually realistic? Or are you going to end up turning yourself into a sweatshop in order to make that? Or is it not even viable at all for that to happen? Yeah. And that seems to be a bit of an aha moment for a lot of people, because they actually do the calculation and go, whoa, that's not possible. I can't spend 12 hours a day making stuff on top of everything else I'm doing. So that's kind of a question to ask yourself, okay, do I have a financial goal here? If I do, are my prices actually going to allow me to reach that financial goal as they stand, or do I need to do some serious work on those prices? And do I need to do serious work on my products? Am I actually selling products that people want and need and that have a market for them? Or am I just making things willy-nilly because I make them? And that's fine, but it's fine to do for yourself. But when you want to start a business, you really have to put yourself in the mind of the customer. It completely changes, I find, it completely changes your relationship to the craft. It's not a hobby anymore. So the way you have to think about it is a bit more, I guess, logical, rational, rather than just being driven emotionally by, oh, that's pretty, I want to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that if it's like just your hobby, that's what you should be doing. But when you make that leap into business, you need to switch that business brain on and go, okay, let's take a step back, try to be slightly more objective about what my products are, what my prices are, who my customer is, and, all of those sorts of elements of the process. And I find a lot of people jump into setting up their shop and making sure they have a perfect logo and making, all this sort of superficial stuff. I mean, it's important, but if you don't have the fundamentals right, you're going to reach a point eventually where you go, hang on a second, something's very wrong here. And that's when you might have to reevaluate that sort of thing.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I remember there was a period where I ran a fingerprint jewelry business, which is I did it for like a year or two, just putting like fingerprints into metal clay. And I just started it because I was just on a whim. I was like, oh, I'll just start that. No sort of thought about it. And it was doing really well. It was doing really successful. And I got to the point where every day I was sat down with like 50 orders to make by the end of the day. And I was just sat there like with my cookie cutter, like with my sander, like, and I was like, this isn't fun. Like I enjoyed it for like maybe a few months. And I was like, this isn't what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like this isn't enjoyable. And so the money was coming in, it was working, but a bit like you said, it just wasn't what I wanted. And I was like, I need to be a bit more strategic about what I want. And I think that's a really important point. It all needs to work together, and sometimes it takes people a while to get there, which is it took me a while. And I like, because your range is wedding rings, isn't it? And
that's the majority of our sales. Like we sell plenty of other things, earrings, necklaces, whatnot, but kind of my simple sterling silver thread earrings and my wedding rings are the kind of best selling ranges. Yeah.
And I think I remember you sharing before that wasn't necessarily your intention, but that was what people wanted, and it was just kept selling out. So you were like, okay, we'll do more of it.
Yeah, I just kind of went with what the market was telling me it wanted more of, and just went in that direction. And that's kind of how my brand developed. You know, it was that play between what I wanted to make and what was selling. You know, what sort of products were selling. Okay, well, people seem to like that. Can I make more stuff in that sort of vein? Yeah, and I think I was about 4 years in, I had about 450 products. It was insane in my shop. And I had a lot of like stuff with beads on it and gemstones and whatnot. And I'm like, this is overwhelming. Like a lot of it's not selling and, you know, blah, blah. And so I made a really, at the time, difficult decision to cull like 2/3 of my product range and just really narrow down what my shop was all about, which was silver, simple, minimalist silver designs. And I got rid of like everything else, some of which was selling well. So it was kind of scary to do, but in the end, it was a really good decision because it strengthened my brand and it, you know, streamlined my product range. And so those sorts of decisions can be scary, but they can pay off as well.
Definitely, yeah. It's having the confidence, isn't it, to say, actually, less is more, and I'm going to streamline and, you know, get rid of the kind of jumble sale approach of just everything I make goes in one place. So I think that's always inspiring to look at. And then you mentioned about SEO as well, because I think, you know, we can have this amazing shop, we can upload all our images and have all our products, and we're like, especially nowadays with Etsy, like, no one's visiting my shop, I'm not selling anything. So tell us a bit about that and what your advice would be.
Yeah, SEO is so important. Like for me, like a large portion of my sales on Etsy come from Etsy search. Like that's what I focus on, is getting the traffic from the platform to buy. You know, that's where my marketing goes. So SEO is very important because that's what's going to drive people who come to the platform to your shop and to your products. So it stands for search engine optimization, and basically, at the end of it, it can be really complicated. Like there can be so many details. And I did this program with Etsy. It's called Etsy U last year. So Etsy University, basically, where they worked with, they partnered with like a whole bunch of educators and Etsy sellers. And they took us through a training, and then we passed that knowledge on to our communities. So I've got a couple of videos on my YouTube channel of Etsy U workshops, and one of them is on SEO. And there's so much detail that can go into your SEO. But at the end of the day, the question you need to ask yourself is, what is my potential customer typing into the search bar to find my stuff? Like what words are they going to type into the search bar that would bring them to my product because it describes my product perfectly? Those are the words you need to be using in titles and your tags and the beginning of your description. Now, on Etsy, your description actually doesn't count towards your SEO. However, you also are getting, you know, brought up on Google search, and Google search does count your description when they're ranking you. So don't neglect that first few sentences of your description. Make sure they're keyword rich as well. So yeah, just think that, try to put yourself in the mind of a customer. A lot of people waste space in their titles and tags on fluffy words. Like they might name their product something like the amber necklace, but it's not actually made from amber. That's just like the name of it. You know, the Cheryl ring or whatever. Don't waste space with those words.
Get to the point.
Yeah.
What is it?
Describe it. Describe your product in as much detail as possible. Those are the keywords that you need to put in your titles and tags. And that is what will help people to find you. Because they're not looking for the amber necklace. They're looking for, a simple sterling silver necklace, customized, and what are they looking for? How do you describe the product? So that's really, at the end of the day, it's just tweaking that and working out what the best keywords are. And the thing to know about a keyword, it's not just a word. A keyword can be a phrase. So, simple sterling silver earrings, that's actually like a keyword, but it's a phrase. So don't get caught up on the idea that a keyword is just a single word, because it's a bit of confusing jargon there. But yeah, so look for those words and use them. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, in the titles and the tags especially, I guess, and like you said, in descriptions. And I think it's interesting to think about what people would search for, because sometimes as jewelers we have more technical ways of saying things that a customer might not know what granulation is. They're just like silver balls or whatever.
Don't use jargon. So whatever your craft is, you'll have jargon related to it, and try to avoid that. Like think, okay, if I was outside of this niche industry, what words would somebody use? They wouldn't necessarily know the technical terms. They would use a word that was more descriptive. So you want to try to I mean, you can put those technical terms in there if you have space, but, you know, the normal run-of-the-mill buyer probably isn't going to know those terms. So don't prioritise them. Prioritise the more descriptive terms that, you know, a layperson would use in order to find your products. And also, when you are setting your product up on Etsy, in your product listing, there's a whole bunch of attributes that you can choose to assign to your product. Those work like tags as well. So don't neglect those. Go through and fill all of those in, because they actually, you know, contribute to your SEO as well.
Yeah, great advice. And I think, you know, when you've got a lot of products, I think one of the issues that I see people have is they just can't face doing all this stuff, which I can understand. And like for me, it's just doing a bit each day. But how did you do it with your shop? Did you do it all yourself, or did you outsource any of it, or did you just say, look, this is just happening, this is the day, and it's all?
I did it all myself, and for me it was easy because in the earlier days I did kind of product collection launches, but then I went through a period of just sort of releasing stuff regularly. And so it wasn't a big chore when it's like one or two things once, you know, every week or so. Yeah. So just do it gradually is what I say. Yeah, it seems like but once it's done, it's done. Like, sure, you can come back later and fiddle around with your SEO and stuff if you want to, if it's not working. And by not working, give it a couple of months, or at least a month or 2 months, because it can take up to a month for it to really start working. So don't go and mess with your SEO like weekly or anything. That's just not going to work. Don't do it any more frequently than monthly, and don't get too caught up with it. I think people can get really caught up with messing with little tiny nuances, which can be a time waster. Like if you've got a product that's selling well, but do not mess with the SEO on that product. Just leave it alone and go.
It's doing something good.
I've made that mistake. Oh my God. Go work on the ones that aren't doing well. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I like the idea of keeping it simple as well. Like obviously you can learn so much more about it, but sometimes just doing the big obvious things are enough to make a massive difference, and you don't go down a big rabbit hole of overload of information.
Exactly.
So let's talk a bit about photographs, because we all know that they are so important. So how do they work on Etsy? Like how many should we have? Like any kind of tips?
Okay. So you can have up to 10 photos these days, which is awesome. You don't need to have 10 photos. Now, the number of photos you have does not affect your SEO. So it doesn't affect your search ranking. What it does affect potentially is your conversion rate. So the number of people who click through to your product and then end up buying it. And the higher a conversion rate your product has, that actually gives a signal to the Etsy search algorithm to show your product higher and higher, because they know it's selling and they want to keep, you know, they want to make money. So they want to elevate the products that are selling, right?
Yeah.
So indirectly it affects it, but not directly. You can also put video now. So you can put a video in your listing. So which is a great thing for people who have like products that are, you know, really lend themselves to demonstration of some description, even if it's just, you know, you could show yourself making the product in that video, which is a really nice use of it as well. But there are kind of, I think I have a video. It's called like the 7 types of product photos you should have in your Etsy shop. So there's a range of them. So, you know, you want what's called a studio shot. It's like the basic, simple product shot that your product is front and center, really cropped in close, and it's the star of the show. Like that's the first product photo you see everywhere, you know. And then you want to have a scale photo that shows how big or small the product is in relation to, you know, humans or a couch or something. You want to have detailed shots that show the detail of the product. You want to have in-use shots. So if your product is, you know, say a handbag, you know, being held by a person or carried by a person. If it's a ring, you know, on a finger, so a model shot as well, like being modeled by somebody. So all of those different types of photos that build the story of your item and help people to imagine it in their lives. Like how am I going to use this product? How is it going to be part of my life? And so that's what you want to use those photos to get across to people. I always feel really sad when I go to a shop and they've got like one photo. It's like, here's my product. That's not, you're not telling me much about it. Like, what does the back of it, that product look like? Or the top or the bottom? Like, how big is it? How small is it? Sure, you've told me the measurements in the description, but can I really visualize that? Like, make it easy for people to see the product in their own lives. And obviously make sure those photos are excellent photos, because honestly, that is what you're competing on Etsy. Like, your SEO will help your product show up in search, but if you have really good SEO and terrible photos, nobody's ever going to click through to your product. They're just going to gloss right over it and click through to someone who has amazing photos. So it is really, really important to work on your photography and get photos that are as good as you can possibly get them.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. And I think all of that would apply to a website as well, which is really nice. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about could be on Etsy or could be on a website, but it's nice to know how the platform works. I love the idea of having a video of making or something. Yeah. I think that really kind of is a nice way to connect with the customer. Yeah, the big juicy close-up is what we call it at the front, because it's just a thumbnail, isn't it, that you see on Etsy? So it needs to be quite big. Like, yeah, it's interesting to shop on Etsy as well, to like as some market research, because I definitely find when I'm looking through stuff, it gives me so much more information about what my choices are. Oh, I really like to see, like, I really like model shots, because if I'm going to buy something like a necklace and I can't see it on a person, I'm just not that confident. I don't know how it hangs. Like, it's...
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking about while you're talking is, you know, the idea of like one product shot. I just don't trust that person as much. I'm like, I don't know if they've got it together as much. I think that's a big thing on Etsy for me as well as a buyer, is I'm like, are they going to actually ship it on time? And is it, because there are lots of hobbyists on there, which is awesome.
Yeah, are they a professional?
Yeah, exactly. Are they a professional? Am I going to get my thing? Is it going to be broken? Like, are they going to be able to deal with customer service?
Yeah.
So building that kind of trust with the customer, I think, is so important too.
It is.
And I guess on that line, you talked about, you know, ways to make your shop look professional. So you've got these beautiful photographs and you've got this great SEO and you've got this awesome product. What else can we do to make our shop look as professional as possible on Etsy?
Well, obviously you're limited by the platform. You know, there's only so much you can do to modify it. So your main page, you know, your photos really are the thing that are going to brand your business on Etsy. So make sure your photos are consistent. Like they have similar backgrounds, consistent coloring, all that sort of stuff. On your main page, you've got your banner, your logo, and your avatar. So your banner is the big thing across the top of the screen that people see. Your logo is just your shop logo, and your avatar is your personal profile picture. So all of those will show up on your shop page. So you want to make sure they're all branded and complementary with each other, and they're not like jarringly different. So that's kind of the main thing you can do apart from your photos to make sure that visually your shop looks professional. And it's important to spend a little bit of time making sure those things look good. And it's not hard to do. Like, use a free program like Canva to create your banner. You know, if you're not sure, you can just, you know, use a landscape photo in there or do a collage of a couple of different pictures or something. Just something that showcases your business from the get-go. And obviously, you know, have all the little details filled in, you know, your shop title, and you have some shop sections in there and all those bits and pieces. Also, really importantly, fill in your policies and your about section. Those are things that are going to contribute to the professionality of your shop. You know, when I go to a shop and I see an empty about section and like very sparse policies, I'm like, you know, I really want to see that filled in, you know, to get to know you a little bit. And that's where you can, you know, build in the branding and story of your business in that about section. And in your FAQs as well, there's like an FAQ section you can fill in. So if you do have people asking you frequently asked questions, put them in there and, you know, help your customers out. Try to answer all their answer their objections before they can bring them to you by putting them in there. And of course, a lot of people won't read them and then they'll message you anyway, but at least they're there. So yeah. And another little tip about SEO is having your about section filled in and your policies filled out actually gives you a slight boost in search against people who don't have that information. So make sure to fill those in.
Yeah, great advice again. And I think you're right. I always know I start looking at the product and I get excited about the product and I think, oh, I'm interested in buying. Then the next thing I do is look at the person and, look a bit about them. Is it all filled out? I mean, I don't think in my mind, is it all filled out? But if it's an empty space, I'm a bit like, oh, okay. Is this, not sure. It's that trusting again, I think, you want to feel like that person's present online and that they're here and that this business is real for them and, your money is going to be safe with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I think all of those things are super important. And, how do reviews work on Etsy? Like, do they affect the SEO? And I know that it can be a struggle sometimes to get your initial reviews. And yeah, how did that work for you? Or if you got any tips around review?
Yeah, well, the review system has evolved over the years. It was very different back when I started out. Like there were no stars, for example. So nowadays, as a customer, you can leave a review. As a seller, you can't leave a review of customers. You used to be able to, but they removed that functionality a long time ago. What you can do is respond to a review if it's 3 stars or less. I believe it's 3 stars or less. So if somebody gives you basically a low review or a bad review, you have the option to publicly respond to that review, which is good because you can explain your side of the story of what's happened there. And make sure, obviously, to be very professional about that. Don't go, this customer was terrible. Don't let them buy from you, even if that's the case. Just be kind and rationally explain your side of the story. So, yeah, reviews are great and they are important. What I often tell my customers is, look, do you have friends and family who are going to buy from you? Just get them to buy through your Etsy shop and ask them to leave a review because that's easy to do. Because you have a relationship with those people, you don't feel so bad going, can you leave me, a review? Because you don't want to just randomly message customers asking them to leave you a review. That's a bit pushy. If you can work it naturally into a conversation you're already having, that's fine. But I don't personally think you should message customers saying, hey, leave me a review. I think it's a bit rude. The best thing you can do is create an amazing customer experience for the person and send them an amazing product because then they're way more likely to respond to you. Another thing you can do to contribute to that is build a relationship with them. This is something I'm still to this day shocked that so many Etsy sellers don't do. And that's like whenever I sell anything online to, whether it's Etsy or my shop, I send my customers a manual thank you message. Now, this message is pre-written. The only thing I change is a few details. It's like 5 pages. It's quite long. And I tell them my story. Like, I'm like, thank you so much for buying from me. You're supporting, my small business and keeping my cats fed, much more detail. And within that message, I then give them all the information they need about their order. Like within the next 1 to 2 weeks, we're going to sit down at our, jewelry studio and make your product. And then we'll wrap it up with care and send it. And it will take this long to get to you. And I'm available between these hours if you have any questions on these days. And, I'll get back to you within 24 hours, blah, blah, blah. So I give them all of the practical information they need in that message, but I also give them the emotional connection. Like I humanize myself. I'm like, hey, I'm a real person. You've just done an amazing thing by supporting my business. Thank you so much. And it's made a huge difference in my business. Like the amount of people who then message me back and sort of tell me the story of why they're buying the thing. And if you start off your relationship with your customers in that positive way, they are so much more likely to not only leave you a review, but come to you if there's a problem, rather than just leaving a bad review or, opening a case against you, because they know that you care. And so, it's really worth the time to build that positive relationship up front with your customers.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's probably one of the most powerful things you can do. And it's amazing to see how it's worked in your business, because you're right. It's, you've just made a purchase. Often people get kind of like buyer's remorse or a little bit of like, was that the right thing to do? Like, have I, should I really have done that? And to get a nice message from a human to say like, oh, thank you. And like, don't worry, you're in safe hands and all of that you're just immediately like, oh, great. You know, and I mean, not always, you don't always get buyer's remorse, but sometimes people can feel a bit, it's again, that trust thing of buying online. When you go into a shop, you kind of feel a lot more secure about making a purchase because you can see the person, you can, you know, visit the physical store. So, and we're all getting better at buying online. Well, I know I am. But yeah, it's really nice to add that personal element. And I think you're right. Like, if somebody had done that to me, I wouldn't want to leave them a bad review. Even if I had a bad experience, I would go to them.
And I think that security thing is a big reason why I say, you know, keep your Etsy shop. Even if your business grows and you open your own website and stuff, the nice thing about having an Etsy shop is people feel a bit safer buying through a venue like that than they might buying directly from you, perhaps the first time. Like, not everybody, but some people. Because they've got the security of knowing there's a bigger organisation there to protect them if necessary. So that is another good, you know, thing about being on a venue like Etsy.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good point. And the final point you had was about not neglecting the boring bits, which I think we kind of covered anyway. But yeah, it's kind of filling out all those shipping profiles and all of that stuff. But it's so important, isn't it? Before you go to make a purchase, you need to know that stuff. Like, when is this going to come? How much is it going to cost?
People who are like, oh, I just asked people to message me for a shipping quote. I'm like, no. No.
Yeah.
Unless you really have an extremely complicated product, like a massive table or something that you really can't work out the shipping for ahead of time, do the work. You want to, reduce the barriers for your customer to purchase from you, reduce the objections they might have. Like, I don't know what the percentage would be, but I'd say a very high percentage of people who would get to that point of being able to click checkout and they can't because there's no shipping, they'd be just like, I'll look elsewhere, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'd be off.
Do the work.
I know I'd be off.
Yeah, I would be off as well. I'm like, you're not doing that. That's your job.
Yeah.
So do the work. It can be hard. It can be complicated. But look, most of those sort of boring jobs from that perspective, like setting up your listings, you do them once. And if you do them properly, they're done. Like, if you have repeatable designs, which is what I recommend most people do have as much as possible, you know, you can sell the same thing 1,000 times and just do the work once to set it all up. So yeah, do it properly the first time as much as you can.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, Jess, thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and advice on Etsy. And I think your story is really inspiring. You know, how you just kind of started out as a hobby, started this business, and now you have this incredible brand that you've created. And I also love just everything about your story, that you made this eco van and all this kind of cool stuff. So I know you've got a few kind of guides and courses and things that people might be interested in. So do you want to tell us a bit about them, where they can get more support?
Yeah, well, the most useful one, I think, for those of you who are starting out, I have like a 2-page checklist. It's called the Etsy Kickstart Guide. So it's literally a checklist of all the little niggly little bits and pieces that you need to make sure you do when you set up your Etsy shop for the first time. So you can get that over at createandthrive.com/Etsy guide. So that's all one word. And you can download that there. And then I've got, you know, tons of stuff on my YouTube channel and my own podcast about Etsy. Especially probably those Etsy U workshops will be really useful, because they're like on photography and SEO and stuff like that. So if you really want to dive into those topics and learn, like, this information is directly from Etsy. It's not stuff I've just made up myself. So that will be really, really useful to make sure you're, you know, setting everything up correctly the first time.
Brilliant.
And one final thing is I do a course called Set Up Shop, which is a 30-day intensive course that helps you set up an online shop from beginning to end. And it can be, you know, any venue, Etsy, Shopify, WooCommerce, whatever venue you want to use. A lot of my students use Etsy because it's just easy and it's the cheapest option really to get started on. But you can check that out over at createandthrive.com/setup shop if you're interested in joining me. The next class runs, I'm not quite sure when this podcast is going out, but the next course starts March 1st. And it's a very affordable course. It's meant to be for beginners. So yeah.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure we put the links to both of those in the show notes so you guys can go and check them out. And can we follow you somewhere online as well if people just want to connect?
So if you want to check out my jewellery, you can follow me on Instagram at Epheriell, and that's EPHERIELL. It's a made-up word.
I like it.
If you want to follow my business advice, at Create and Thrive on Instagram. So that's AND in the middle, Create and Thrive, all one word. And I have lots of stuff there as well. So yeah, that's where you can say hi and let me know you listen to the show.
Yeah, please do. Well, yeah, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing. I'm sure we'll have you back because you're just a wealth of knowledge on all of these topics and such a lovely person sharing all of it as well. So yeah, thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Jess.